I was holding the box long before I realized my hands were shaking. It was small, wrapped in elegant cream paper with a thin gold ribbon tied perfectly on top, the kind of detail that always impressed guests but somehow felt cold up close. My granddaughter Lily had always had impeccable taste. That hadn't changed. What had changed was something I couldn't quite name yet. I turned the box slowly, noticing the envelope tucked beneath the ribbon. For a moment I hesitated. Then I opened it. The note inside was written in her neat, flowing handwriting, the same handwriting I had once proudly shown to her teachers when she was a child. "Next Christmas, you won't be alone. We'll make sure you're taken care of." There was a smiley face at the end. Something about it made my stomach drop. I read it again, and again. The words didn't look threatening at first glance. Anyone else might have thought it was sweet, caring even. But I knew better, because I knew Lily, and I knew what she meant. Behind me, laughter echoed softly from the living room. Holiday music played, the fireplace crackled, and everything looked exactly like the kind of Christmas I had spent years trying to build. Warm, safe, full. But suddenly, it felt staged. Artificial. Cold. "Grandma, you're quiet. Don't you like it?" Her voice snapped me back. I turned, forcing a smile onto my face as I folded the note carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently. "It's thoughtful." Lily beamed. She always knew how to perform affection. That was her greatest talent. "Mom said it was time we started planning ahead," she added casually, sipping her drink like this was an ordinary conversation. "Planning ahead." I nodded slowly, as if the words didn't echo loudly in my head. "I see." She leaned closer, lowering her voice slightly, though not enough to be discreet. "You know that's just safer. For you. Living alone isn't really ideal anymore." There it was. Not concern. Not love. Control. I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Not sadness. Not fear. Something sharper. But I kept smiling, because I had learned over time that reacting too soon only gave people exactly what they wanted. "I appreciate you thinking about me," I said softly. And she believed me. That was the problem. She always believed me. Later that evening, after everyone left, the silence in the house pressed against my chest. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea I hadn't touched. The decorations still sparkled around me. The tree lights blinked lazily, casting soft reflections across the walls. For years, this house had been full of life. Now it felt like a stage after the audience had gone home. Empty, quiet, exposed. I leaned back slowly and closed my eyes. Memories came whether I wanted them or not. Lily at 7 years old, crying in my arms the night her mother died. Lily at 10, refusing to sleep unless I sat beside her. Lily at 14, promising me she would always take care of me the way I took care of her. I had believed her. Of course I had, because I had built my life around that belief. After my daughter passed, I didn't hesitate. I became everything Lily needed. I gave up my business, my time, my savings, piece by piece, willingly. There was never a question. She was family, and family came first. At least, that's what I had always told myself. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Giving became expected, then required, and finally taken. My eyes opened slowly. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt like something I was slowly being removed from. And that thought settled deep in my chest like a stone. I reached for my phone without fully thinking. The screen lit up instantly. Missed calls. Messages. All from Lily. "Did something happen? Why did you leave early, Grandma?" I stared at the messages for a long moment. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app. The numbers appeared instantly, familiar, routine. But tonight they felt different. Detached. Cold. I scrolled through recent activity. Charges. Transfers. Subscriptions I didn't remember approving. At first, I thought it was just confusion. Then I looked closer, and everything slowed down. There were patterns. Small amounts at first, then larger, more frequent, more deliberate. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone.
No.
Not possible. But the evidence didn't lie. I kept scrolling, and the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't care. This wasn't help. This was control. And worse, it had been happening for a long time. I sat there in silence. Not shocked. Not even surprised. Just awake. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking at Lily as the little girl I raised. I was looking at her as she truly was. And what I saw frightened me. Not because she had changed, but because I had refused to see it.
My phone buzzed again.
Incoming call, Lily. I watched it ring.
Once. Twice. 3 times.
Then it stopped. A second later, a new message appeared. Grandma, something's wrong with the card. It got declined. I stared at the words. Then slowly, I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a kind one. A calm one. Because now I understood.
Completely.
Without doubt. Without confusion. I tapped the screen. Opened the settings. And, with one quiet movement, I froze the account. The house was silent again. But this time it felt different. Not empty. Not cold.
Still. Clear.
I stood up slowly and walked toward the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, steady, covering everything in white. For a moment, I simply watched it. Then I spoke quietly, almost to myself. My turn. The next morning didn't feel like a continuation of my life. It felt like the beginning of something else entirely. I woke up earlier than usual, long before the sun had fully risen, and lay still for a few seconds, listening to the silence in the house. It wasn't the same silence as before. Before, it had been heavy, almost suffocating. Now it felt sharp, awake, like the moment before a storm breaks. I sat up slowly, my body stiff but my mind unusually clear, and for the first time in years, I didn't reach for my phone out of habit. Instead, I walked straight to my office. The room smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish. It had always been my space, organized, controlled, predictable. A place where numbers made sense, where everything added up.
I used to take pride in that.
Being precise, being careful, being in control. And yet, somewhere along the way, I had allowed someone else to quietly take that control away from me piece by piece, without even noticing. That realization didn't hurt as much as I expected. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like insult. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, the one I rarely touched anymore, and frowned when it resisted. For a moment, I just stood there, hand on the handle, as if the drawer itself knew what I was about to find and was trying to stop me. Then I pulled harder. It opened with a dry, reluctant sound. Inside was chaos. That alone was enough to unsettle me. I don't keep chaos. Not in my home. Not in my work. Not in my life. At least, I didn't used to. I sat down and began sorting through the papers slowly, methodically, forcing myself to stay calm. Bank statements, insurance documents, tax reports, everything mixed together, without order. That wasn't my doing. That was the first clear sign. I separated them into piles, my movement steady, almost mechanical, but inside, something was building. Not panic. Not yet. Something colder. Then I found the credit card statements. At first glance, they looked normal. Then I read them. My fingers tightened slightly as I turned the first page, then the second, then the third. Expensive restaurants. Boutique stores I had never stepped into. Online purchases from brands I didn't even recognize. Jewelry. Electronics. Travel deposits. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I just kept reading. Because the more I saw, the more important it became to understand everything, not just pieces. By the time I reached the most recent statement, I had already done the math in my head. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding.
It was a pattern.
And it was deliberate. I leaned back in the chair slowly, letting out a quiet breath. How long? I whispered, though I already knew the answer before finishing the thought. Months. Maybe longer. Long enough that it had become routine. Long enough that whoever was doing this no longer feared being caught. There was only one person who had access. Only one person I had trusted enough. Lily. I said her name quietly, testing how it felt in my mouth now. It didn't feel the same. Not soft.
Not warm. Just distant.
I reached for my laptop, opened it, and logged into my accounts. The interface was familiar, clean, simple, easy. She had set it up for me last year, insisting it would make things easier. At the time, I had been grateful. Now I paid attention to every detail. Transfers. That's what I looked for. And I found them almost immediately. Small amounts at first. 200, 300. Spread out just enough to avoid attention. Then larger ones. 1,000, 2,000,
5.
My chest tightened, not from shock, but from the precision of it. This wasn't careless spending. This was strategy. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. I clicked on one of the transfers, then another, and another, all leading to the same account. I stared at the name attached to it. Ethan Cole. For a second, my mind went blank. Then it snapped into place. Lily's father. Of course it was him. A slow, bitter understanding spread through me, filling in the gaps I hadn't wanted to see before. He had always been charming on the surface, careful with his words, calculated in his actions. The kind of man who never pushed too hard, just enough to guide, to influence, to plan ideas. And Lily had listened, not because she was forced to, but because it benefited her. I closed my eyes briefly. That realization hurt more than the money, because money can be replaced. But trust, once broken like this, changes everything. When I opened my eyes again, I noticed something else, a folder tucked behind the stack of papers. It wasn't labeled in my handwriting. That alone made my pulse slow down even further. I reached for it, opened it, and everything became perfectly clear. Inside were brochures, facilities, care centers, places I had never seen, never considered, never discussed. Some were clean, professional, acceptable. Others, not even close. One brochure had notes written in the margins. Neat handwriting. Lily's. Affordable option. Covered after assets reduced. Good timeline.
Timeline.
I stared at that word longer than the others. Timeline didn't mean concern. Timeline meant plan. A structured, intentional plan.
For me.
For my life. For my removal. My hands didn't shake this time. They were completely still. That was when I understood something important. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't even personal anymore. This was business. And I had been the asset.
My phone buzzed on the desk.
I didn't look at it right away. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was. Instead, I reached forward and calmly closed the folder, placing it neatly on top of the other documents. Then I picked up the phone.
Lily. Calling again.
I let it ring once.
Twice.
Then I answered. Grandma, finally. What's going on? My card isn't working and… I know, I said calmly. Silence. A short one, but enough. What do you mean you know? I mean exactly that, I replied. I blocked it. Another silence. Longer this time. Confusion shifting into something sharper. You what? Why would you do that? I stood up and walked slowly toward the window, watching the snow from yesterday still covering the ground in a perfect white layer. Untouched.
Clean.
Because it's mine, I said simply. That doesn't make any sense, she snapped, the sweetness gone now, replaced by irritation.
I use that card all the time.
You know that. Yes, I said quietly.
Ido.
There was something in my tone that made her pause. I could feel it.
The shift.
Is something wrong? She asked more carefully now. Yes, I answered.
A beat.
What? You underestimated me. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that doesn't come from confusion, but from realization. Grandma, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I saw everything, Lily. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I saw the charges, the transfers, the accounts, the plans. Her breathing changed on the other end. Small.
Tight.
Thinking. Calculating. Just like him. You're confused, she said finally, softer now, careful. We've talked about this. You forget things sometimes and… No, I said. Just one word. But it stopped her completely. I remember everything. I continued. More clearly than I have in years. I turned away from the window. And I'm not the one who should be worried about that. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I felt something far more dangerous.
Clarity.
And clarity doesn't leave room for hesitation. I picked up my phone again and started making calls. The bank first. Every account frozen. Every access point removed. Every authorization revoked. Then a locksmith. New locks.
Today. No dilas. No chances.
No more assumptions. By the time I set the phone down, the house no longer felt like something being taken from me. It felt like something I was taking back.
Piece by piece.
Exactly the way it should have always been. That evening, as the sky darkened and the lights inside the house reflected softly against the windows, I sat in the living room with the documents spread neatly across the table in front of me. Not chaotic anymore. Not hidden. Not ignored. Understood. Every page. Every number. Every detail. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't broken. I was ready. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. By the time evening came, everything was already in motion, and for once in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was ahead. The locks had been changed an hour earlier, the quiet metallic clicks echoing through the house like a declaration I didn't need to say out loud. This was no longer a place anyone could walk into whenever they pleased. Not anymore. I had also spoken to the bank, confirmed every restriction, verified every detail twice. There was a strange calm in that process, something almost comforting about taking control of facts, numbers, systems, things that didn't lie, didn't manipulate, didn't pretend to care while quietly taking everything from you. People did that. Systems didn't. I had just finished arranging the documents on the coffee table when the doorbell rang. Right on time. I didn't rush to open it. I stood there for a moment instead, looking at the papers in front of me. Statements, transfers, printed records, notes. Evidence. Not assumptions. Not feelings.
Facts.
Then the bell rang again, longer this time, more impatient. I walked to the door slowly and looked through the peephole. Lily. Of course. Her posture was tense, one hand gripping her phone, the other adjusting her coat like she was preparing for a performance. For a brief second, I saw the child she used to be, the one who waited for me to open the door after school, smiling, trusting, safe. Then it disappeared. I opened the door. "Grandma, what is going on?" she said immediately, stepping forward, irritation already in her voice. "Why isn't my key working?" I didn't move aside. "I changed the locks." She blinked.
Once. Twice.
Processing. "You changed the locks?" she repeated, disbelief turning into offense. "Why would you do that without telling me?" Without telling her. The irony almost made me smile. "Because it's my house," I said calmly. She stared at me like I had said something unreasonable, something offensive, something wrong. For a moment, I could see her trying to decide which version of me she was dealing with, the one she could manage or the one she couldn't. "I think we need to talk," she said finally, her tone shifting, softer now, controlled. "We do," I agreed. This time, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes immediately scanning the room, noticing everything. The table, the papers, the order, the atmosphere. Something in her expression changed. She understood. Not everything, but enough. "What is all this?" she asked, though her voice was quieter now. "You tell me," I replied. She didn't sit at first. She walked closer to the table, her eyes moving quickly across the documents, recognizing them one by one. I watched her carefully. Not what she said, but how she reacted. The tension in her shoulders. The way her fingers tightened slightly around her phone. The pause in her breathing.
Guilt.
Then calculation. Then defense. "I don't understand what you're trying to prove," she said, finally looking up at me, her expression already shifting into something more controlled, more practiced. "These are just normal transactions." "Are they?" I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. She crossed her arms slightly, leaning back just enough to create distance, as if that alone could separate her from what was in front of her. "You gave me access to your accounts," she said. "You said I could help you manage things. For emergencies," I corrected. "These were emergencies," she insisted quickly. "You don't always remember things clearly, and I've been trying to make sure everything stays under control." There it was. Not apology. Not explanation. Rewriting reality. I nodded slowly. "Interesting," I said. "Because from what I can see, these emergencies include designer stores, weekend trips, and several $1,000s transferred to your father." Her face changed again. Faster this time. A flicker of panic, gone almost instantly. "Dad was helping invest some money," she said.
For you.
"For your future." "My future," I repeated. "Yes," she said, more confidently now, stepping into the narrative she was building. "We've been trying to make sure you're secure. You're not as young as you used to be, and—" Stop. Just one word, but it cut through everything. She froze. Not completely, but enough. "I've read everything, Lily," I said quietly. "Every transfer, every charge, every note." Her eyes shifted slightly. "Notes," she repeated. I walked to the table, picked up the folder, and opened it slowly, turning it toward her. "The facilities," I said. She didn't respond immediately, didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, "That's not what it looks like," she said quickly. "It looks exactly like what it is." "We were just exploring options," she insisted, her voice rising slightly now. "You live alone. That's not safe. We were thinking ahead." "With a timeline?" I asked. That stopped her again.
I saw it clearly this time.
The moment she realized I knew more than she expected. "You're twisting things," she said, but the confidence was gone now, replaced with something thinner, more fragile.
No, irreplía.
"I'm finally seeing them." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Then she laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're acting paranoid. Honestly, this is exactly what I was worried about. The confusion, the suspicion." I stepped closer. Not aggressively, but deliberately. "Be very careful with what you say next." Her laughter stopped instantly, because she heard it. Not anger, not emotion. Something much more serious. "I am not confused," I said quietly. "And I am not incapable." She swallowed. "Just slightly."
But I saw it.
"And if you continue to suggest otherwise," I added, "this conversation will end very differently." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she exhaled slowly, her posture shifting again, softer now, almost pleading. "Grandma, I'm trying to help you," she said. "You're overreacting. We've done so much for you." "For me?" I repeated. That word again.
For me.
I looked at her carefully. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see my granddaughter. I saw someone who had convinced herself that taking was the same as caring. "No," I said quietly. "You've done a lot, but not for me." Her expression cracked. Just for a second. Then anger replaced it.
Fine, she snapped.
If that's how you want to see it, then go ahead. But don't expect me to fix things when everything falls apart.
I won't, I said.
That surprised her. I could see it immediately. You won't.
No, y replica calmly.
Because nothing is falling apart. I gestured slightly toward the room. This is the first time everything is exactly where it should be. She stared at me, searching for something. Weakness, hesitation, doubt. She didn't find it. What are you going to do? She asked finally. About what? About all of this, she said, gesturing toward the table, though now her voice had lost its edge. I held her gaze.
The right thing, I said.
She frowned slightly. And what is that? I paused. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted her to understand. It depends on you. Silence again.
Different this time.
Uncertain. Uncomfortable.
Real.
When she finally left, she didn't slam the door.
She didn't argue.
She didn't even say goodbye. And somehow that said more than anything else she could have done. I locked the door behind her slowly and stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the handle. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Not anymore. I walked back into the living room and looked at the table, at the evidence, at the truth, at everything I had ignored for far too long. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I had just taken it back. The days after Lily left were quieter than I expected, but not in the way they used to be. This silence wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was deliberate, like a pause I had chosen for myself instead of something forced on me. No messages, no calls, no sudden appearances at my door, just space. Real space. And, at first, I didn't quite know what to do with it. For years, every part of my life had revolved around someone else's needs, someone else's problems, someone else's expectations. Now there was nothing urgent, nothing pulling at me, nothing demanding my attention. It should have felt empty. Instead, it felt unfamiliar. On the third morning, I found myself standing in the middle of my living room, looking around as if I had never truly seen it before. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, the photographs hadn't moved, but something about it all felt different. Or maybe it wasn't the house that had changed. Maybe it was me. I walked slowly across the room, my fingers brushing lightly against the surface of the table, the back of a chair, the edge of the bookshelf. These were things I had lived with for years, and yet I had stopped noticing them somewhere along the way. That realization settled quietly in my mind, not as regret, but as awareness.
I needed to do something.
Not out of obligation, not out of habit, but because I wanted to. The thought itself felt strange, almost unfamiliar. I stood there for a few more seconds, then turned and walked toward my coat, grabbed my keys, and left the house without overthinking it. The cold air outside hit my face immediately, sharp and clean, waking something up inside me. I took a deep breath, then another, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was rushing towards something or away from something. I was simply moving. I didn't have a destination when I got into the car. I just drove. Through streets I had known for decades, past places that held memories I hadn't revisited in years. The town hadn't changed much, but my relationship to it had. It no longer felt like a backdrop to someone else's life. It felt like something I could step back into on my own terms.
I don't know what made me stop where I did.
Maybe instinct. Maybe memory. Maybe something deeper. But before I realized it, I was standing in front of a small art supply store I hadn't visited in over 20 years. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the window display, brushes, canvases, paints arranged in a way that felt both simple and strangely inviting. It stirred something in me, something I hadn't allowed myself to think about in a very long time. I used to paint, not casually, not occasionally, seriously. It had been a part of me once, something I cared about, something that made me feel present. But life had shifted, responsibilities had taken over, and slowly, without any dramatic decision, I had let it go.
Not because I wanted to.
Because I thought I had to. I pushed the door open before I could change my mind. A small bell chimed softly above me, and the smell hit me instantly. Paint, wood, paper. Familiar, comforting, grounding. For a second, I felt like I had stepped into a different version of my life, one I had left behind but never truly forgotten. "Can I help you with anything?" a young woman asked from behind the counter, her tone easy, natural. I opened my mouth to answer, and stopped. What did I need? What was I doing here? The questions came fast, but for once, they didn't overwhelm me. I paused, then let out a small breath. "I think I'm starting over." She smiled, not in a polite way, but in a way that suggested she understood something without needing an explanation. "Then you're in the right place," she said. I found myself smiling back. And just like that, something shifted again. I didn't rush. I walked through the store slowly, letting myself look, touch, consider. I didn't question whether I deserved it. I didn't justify it. I simply chose. Brushes,
Paints.
canvas. More than I probably needed, but for once, that didn't matter. When I finally stepped back outside, bags in hand, the cold air felt different than before. Not sharp, but refreshing. On the drive home, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I wasn't just fixing a problem. I was rebuilding a life. And that meant I could choose what it looked like. The house didn't feel empty when I walked back in. It felt ready. I set everything down in the living room, cleared a space near the window, and stood there for a moment, just looking at what I had brought back into my life. There was hesitation, not doubt, but the awareness that this wasn't just a hobby. It was a piece of me I had set aside for too long. I picked up a brush, turned it in my fingers. Then, without overthinking it, I started. The first strokes were uncertain, not because I had forgotten how, but because it had been so long since I allowed myself to do something without purpose beyond simply doing it. But slowly, that feeling faded. The movement became natural.
Familiar. Steady.
Time passed without me noticing. The light shifted outside, the room dimmed slightly, and still, I didn't stop. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what came next, what needed to be done, what someone else expected from me. I was just there. Present. Focused.
Free.
Later that evening, I sat back and looked at what I had done. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be, because it wasn't about the result. It was about what it meant, and what it meant was everything. My phone buzzed somewhere behind me, breaking the silence. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Then I reached for it. A message. Not from Lily. From someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Clara. I stared at the name for a moment, surprised. Dinner tomorrow. No excuses this time. I almost laughed. Some things didn't change. For years, I had always said no. Too busy. Too tired. Too much to do.
But now,
I looked around the room. At the painting. At the space I had reclaimed. At the life I was beginning to rebuild. And I realized something simple. I didn't have a reason to say no anymore. I typed back. "I'll be there." That night, as I got ready for bed, I paused in front of the mirror. For a long moment, I just looked at myself. Really looked. Not as someone's grandmother. Not as someone responsible. Not as someone needed.
just me.
And what I saw wasn't someone losing control. It wasn't someone fading. It wasn't someone being pushed aside. It was someone waking up. Finally, I turned off the light and lay down, the house quiet around me, but not empty. Not anymore. Because this time, the silence wasn't something I was trapped in. It was something I owned. And for the first time in a very long time, I was exactly where I needed to be. 2 months passed faster than I expected, though not in the rushed, exhausting way time used to move before. This time it unfolded steadily, almost deliberately, as if each day had weight and meaning again. My routine had changed completely, and what surprised me most wasn't the change itself, but how natural it felt. Mornings were no longer about checking messages or solving problems that weren't mine. They were quiet, intentional. Coffee by the window. Light spilling across the floor. Sometimes I would sit there longer than necessary, just watching the street, noticing things I had ignored for years. The rhythm of people walking, the way the light shifted across buildings, the small details that once felt irrelevant but now felt grounding. Afternoons belonged to painting. Not every day was productive, not every canvas turned into something I liked, but that didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. And slowly, without forcing it, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version shaped by obligation, but something older, deeper, more honest. Clara had become a regular part of my life again, and through her, I had met others, people who didn't expect anything from me except conversation, laughter, presence. It was strange at first, almost uncomfortable, to be around people who didn't need me to give them something, fix something, fund something. But over time, that discomfort faded, replaced by something steadier. I began to understand that relationships didn't have to be built on sacrifice to be real. That realization alone changed more than I expected. By the time the doorbell rang that afternoon, I was standing near the window adjusting a canvas, completely absorbed in the balance of light and color. I wasn't expecting anyone. Clara always texted. Deliveries didn't come this late. The sound cut through the quiet in a way that immediately shifted something inside me, not fear, but alertness. I set the brush down slowly, wiped my hands on a cloth, and walked toward the door without rushing. I didn't need to check the peephole to know. Some instincts don't fade. When I opened the door, Lily was standing there. And she wasn't alone. Ethan stood slightly behind her, his posture relaxed in a way that felt deliberate, controlled, the same careful presence I remembered from years ago. He looked exactly the same on the surface.
Polished. Calm.
Measured. But there was something else beneath it now. Something sharper. Less patient. For a brief moment, none of us spoke. Then Lily stepped forward slightly, her expression soft, almost fragile. "Grandma," she said quietly, "can we talk?" Her voice was different. Not the confident, rehearsed tone she used before. This was careful. I looked at both of them, taking in every detail without reacting too quickly. Lily looked thinner, her usual perfection slightly undone. Less makeup, simpler clothes, less control over how she presented herself. Ethan, on the other hand, hadn't changed much at all, which told me everything I needed to know. "This isn't a good time," I said calmly. Ethan stepped forward slightly, just enough to enter the conversation without asking permission. "It won't take long," he said, his voice smooth, familiar, controlled. "We just need to clear a few things up." Clear things up. I almost smiled, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside slowly. "5 minutes," I said. They walked in. And immediately, I saw it, the way their eyes moved across the room, taking in the changes. The paintings. The rearranged furniture. The light. The atmosphere. This wasn't the same house they had tried to plan around. It wasn't passive anymore. It wasn't waiting. It had changed.
And they noticed.
"You've redecorated," Lily said softly. "I've started living," I replied. That made her pause. Ethan didn't comment. He moved further into the room, his gaze sharper, more analytical, already assessing, already calculating. "We're here because things have gone too far," he said finally, turning to face me fully. "You've made some decisions recently that concern us." "Us," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "Family." I held his gaze. There it was again. That word. Family. Used like a shield. Used like a tool. "I'm not sure you understand what that means," I said quietly. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes tightened slightly. "We understand perfectly," he replied. "Which is why we're here. You've cut off access, blocked accounts, isolated yourself." I protected myself. I interrupted. Lily stepped in quickly, her tone softer. "Grandma, please, we're not here to fight," she said. We just want to fix this.
Fix.
Another word that sounded harmless until you understood what it really meant. And what exactly do you think is broken? I asked. Silence.
Short.
Uncomfortable. Then Ethan answered. This situation, he said. Your behavior. The decisions you're making. I nodded slowly. Interesting, I said. Because from where I'm standing, this is the most stable things have been in a long time. Lily looked between us, tension building in her expression. Can we just sit down? She asked. I didn't move. Neither did they. Because we all understood something at that moment. This wasn't a conversation. This was a negotiation. And the balance had changed. You're making a mistake, Ethan said, his tone shifting slightly, less patient now. You're acting on emotion instead of logic. That never ends well. I almost laughed. Emotion. That's what he thought this was. No, I said calmly. This is the first logical decision I've made in years. That landed. I saw it. Lily stepped closer, her voice quieter now, almost breaking. Grandma, please, she said. We didn't mean for things to get like this. I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, I saw it. Not manipulation, not calculation, something else. Regret.
Small.
Fragile, but real. Ethan noticed it too, and I saw the way his expression hardened slightly. Lily, he said sharply, just one word, but enough to pull her back. And just like that, it was gone. Replaced again.
Covered.
Controlled. That told me everything. You should leave, I said quietly. Ethan exhaled slowly, stepping forward again, pushing just a little harder. You're not thinking clearly, he said. And if this continues, we may have to consider other options. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him, and then I understood. Completely. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was about control. And when control failed, escalation followed. What kind of options? I asked. He held my gaze. Legal ones. There it was. Finally. Out in the open. I felt something settle inside me. Not fear. Not anger. Certainty. You can try, I said. That wasn't the answer he expected. I saw it instantly. A small crack in his control. You think this is a game? He asked.
No. Irraplia.
I think it's over. Silence. Heavy. Final. Lily looked at me, something breaking again behind her eyes. Grandma, she whispered, but I shook my head slightly. Not in anger. Not in rejection. Just clarity. You need to decide who you are without him, I said quietly. Ethan's expression changed immediately.
Sharp. Cold.
But Lily didn't respond, because she understood. And that was enough. Time's up, I added. Neither of them moved at first. Then Ethan turned, his jaw tight, his patience gone. Let's go, he said. Lily hesitated for a second longer, then followed. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent again. But this time, it felt stronger. Not quieter. Not emptier. Stronger. I stood there for a moment, letting everything settle. Then I turned back, toward the window. The light hadn't changed. The room hadn't changed. But something else had. This time, when they walked away, they didn't take anything with them. A year later, I almost didn't recognize my own life. Not because it had changed dramatically overnight, but because it had been rebuilt slowly, intentionally, piece by piece, until one day I looked around and realized that everything felt different. Not unfamiliar. Not chum. Just mine. Completely and undeniably mine. The house, once filled with tension I couldn't name, now carried a quiet kind of warmth that didn't depend on anyone else's presence. The mornings were still slow, still quiet, but no longer empty. They belonged to me. Every small routine, the way I made my coffee, the place I chose to sit, the time I allowed myself to simply think, all of it was chosen, not inherited, not imposed, not shaped by someone else's needs. That alone was something I had underestimated for most of my life. The paintings had taken over more space than I ever planned. What started as a small corner by the window had grown into something much larger. Canvases leaning against walls, finished pieces hanging where old photographs used to be, colors replacing memories that had once felt too heavy to carry. I hadn't erased my past. I hadn't forgotten anything. But I had finally stopped living inside it. That was the difference. I could remember without being controlled by it. I could look back without losing myself in it. The exhibition had been Clara's idea at first, something she suggested casually over dinner, as if it were obvious, as if I had always been this person, someone who would share her work, who would invite others to see what she created. I had resisted at the beginning, not out of fear exactly, but out of habit. For years, I had learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less visible. Putting my work out into the world felt like doing the opposite of everything I had trained myself to do. But Clara didn't push. She simply waited, the same way she always did, giving me space to arrive at the decision on my own. And eventually, I did. The night of the exhibition was warmer than I expected for that time of year, the air soft, almost forgiving. I remember standing outside the gallery for a moment before going in, my hand resting lightly on the door, aware of my heartbeat in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not anxiety, something closer to anticipation. The kind that comes when you step into something unknown but necessary. Inside, the space was already full. Voices, movement, light reflecting off the walls where my paintings hung. Not hidden, not tucked away, but visible, present, real. For a second, I just stood there, taking it in, letting myself feel it without rushing to react. Clara spotted me first, of course.
She always did.
"There you are," she said, walking toward me with that same steady confidence I had come to rely on. "I was starting to think you'd run away." "I thought about it," I admitted. She smiled. "I know." That was the thing about her. She didn't need explanations. She understood without them. The evening passed in a way I hadn't expected. People stopped, looked, asked questions. Not out of obligation, not out of politeness, but genuine interest. Conversations that weren't about responsibility or expectations, or what I owed someone. Just curiosity, appreciation, connection. It felt unfamiliar at first, but not uncomfortable. Just new. At some point, I realized I wasn't thinking about Lily, not wondering where she was, not imagining what she would say, not preparing for interruption. That absence was its own kind of freedom. But then later in the evening, I saw her, standing near the back of the room, quiet, still, not approaching, not interrupting, just there. For a moment, everything slowed. Not dramatically, not painfully, just enough for me to notice. She looked different. Not just physically, though that was part of it, simpler clothes, less carefully constructed, less guarded. But it was something deeper than that. The way she held herself, the way she didn't move immediately, the way she seemed unsure. I didn't go to her, and she didn't come to me. Not right away, because for the first time in our relationship, neither of us was trying to control the moment. Eventually, she stepped closer.
Carefully.
As if the distance between us still mattered. "Hi," she said softly. I looked at her. Really looked. And this time, I didn't see the person who had tried to take control of my life. I saw someone who didn't fully understand who she had become. Or who she wanted to be.
Lily, Raplia.
She glanced at the paintings, then back at me. "They're beautiful," she said. Not exaggerated. Not performative.
Simple. Honest. Thank you, I said.
There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just real. "I didn't think you'd want me here," she added. "I didn't think about it," I replied. That surprised her. I could see it, but it was true, because my life was no longer built around her presence or absence. It existed independently, and that changed everything. "I've been working," she said after a moment. "Different jobs, trying to figure things out." I nodded. "I hope you are." She hesitated. then reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I know this doesn't fix anything, she said, holding it out slightly. But I wanted to start somewhere. I took it, not because I trusted it, not because I forgave her, but because I understood what it represented. An attempt.
Small.
Imperfect, but real. I'm not asking for anything, she added quickly. I just didn't want to disappear without saying I'm sorry. I studied her for a moment, and this time, I believed her. Not completely, not blindly, but enough.
Some things take time, I said.
She nodded. I know. Another pause. Then she stepped back slightly. I won't stay long, she said. I just wanted to see this. She gestured lightly toward the room, toward the life I had built. I followed her gaze for a moment, then looked back at her. I'm glad you came, I said. And I meant it, not as forgiveness, not as resolution, but as acknowledgement that something had shifted, that something could still change. Later that night, after everyone had left and the gallery was quiet again, I walked slowly through the space, looking at each painting one more time. Not critically, not analytically, just present. Each one represented a moment I had chosen for myself, a decision I had made without pressure, without expectation, without fear. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler now, the street quieter, the light softer. I didn't rush home. I walked,
slowly,
deliberately, letting the night settle around me. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost, or what had been taken, or what needed to be fixed. I was thinking about what I had built, what I had reclaimed, what I had chosen. Back at home, I paused by the window, the same place where everything had started to change that night a year ago. The snow wasn't falling this time, but the quiet felt familiar. Not empty, not cold, complete. I picked up my sketchbook and sat down, turning to a blank page. For a moment, I just looked at it. Then I began to draw. Not a landscape, not a memory, something else. Myself. Not as I had been, but as I was now. And as the lines began to form, I realized something simple. This wasn't the end of anything. It never had been. It was just the moment I finally understood that my life belonged to me, and it always should have.